Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I want to talk about how so far throughout history, it doesn't really seem like there's much of a punishment for lying under oath. And I want to expose some of the biggest secrets behind share lending. So stay tuned and let's make some money. And now I want to dive straight in with the key information. So, as you can see here, the CEOs of 7 major tobacco corporations testified under oath that nicotine does not cause addiction in 1994. Now, if you didn't already know, maybe you're not a smoker, but nicotine is very, very addictive. And the interesting part is that by 1971, researchers were already beginning to recognise that many smokers were addicted to nicotine present in tobacco smoke. Therefore, in 1971, researchers knew that nicotine was addictive, and somehow yet, over 20 years later, these big corporate CEOs stood in front of Congress and blatantly lied, saying that nicotine was not addictive. If you also didn't already know, none of these corporate CEOs were ever jailed for the damage that they've done around the world. Clearly, back in 1994, there was no punishment for lying under oath. And also clearly today there also seems to be no punishment for lying under oath, as we've seen with Ken Griffin. Now I also wanted to touch on and explain some of the biggest secrets behind share lending. If you haven't already watched this video, I'll link it down in the description below. But it's another interview by Lucy Comastar, but it's quite a long interview and there's quite a lot of quiet portions, so I don't really want to play you the entire 10-minute video, I just want to summarise what was said. So you might already know, but share lending is quite a sketchy practice. But you might not know just how sketchy. In some countries around the world, there's even less laws than in the US around share lending. In some of those countries, you can lend out your share to multiple different people, multiple times over. And also, a lot of these large corporations obviously have subsidiaries in pretty much every country around the world. Therefore, it certainly wouldn't be impossible for some of these large corporations to be lending their shares overseas and lending them many times over, or holding the shares overseas and lending them to us many times over. Now, obviously, share lending is a profitable process, but many people wonder just how profitable it is. Obviously, in the video, Lucy explains that some research was done and investigations were performed on just how profitable share lending actually is, and there is some large institutions out there where 70% of their profits, and therefore I assume at least 70% of their revenues, comes directly from share lending. Basically, all of this money isn't made from the gains they make on the purchase and sales of investments, but over 70-75% of their profits comes directly from lending out shares. You might have thought that share lending can't really be that profitable if they're only generating a 1% lending fee, but I guess if they're lending out those shares many times over, then that lending fee can quickly rack up. But this is positive for AMC because it goes to show just how expensive it is for those short hedge funds to continue borrowing those shares. If share lenders are making 75% of their profits from share lending, it means that short hedge funds are paying 75% of their profits for the benefit of borrowing those shares. And one thing that's really interesting is sometimes those institutions that are lending out those shares might end up lending out fake shares to the hedge funds looking to borrow shares to cover their short positions. And therefore, sometimes those hedge funds are covering their short positions or covering their failed to delivers with borrowed fake shares. Now, as you can imagine, a lot of people don't have much confidence in the stock market at the moment. All of these big institutions and hedge funds get all of these exemptions, there's a lack of reporting, and it basically seems like all of the normal rules and laws just don't apply to them. But when investing in cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's much more of an even playing field. I personally use BlockFi to invest in cryptocurrency. And not only can you just invest in cryptocurrency and buy some Bitcoin, but you can also earn up to 8.25% interest on your deposits and your purchases. BlockFi also offer a rewards credit card where you can earn an introductory rate of 3.5% cashback on your purchases paid in crypto. There's also no annual fee, but unfortunately it's only available in the US at the moment. And when you've generated a large profit on your investment, instead of selling off your Bitcoin to buy a new car, you can take out a crypto-backed loan with BlockFi as well, with interest rates as low as 4.5%. So be sure to sign up to BlockFi using my link down below in the description to get up to $250 of free Bitcoin just for signing up with BlockFi and making your first deposit. And now I also wanted to touch on Evergrande facing a fresh debt deadline as property market woes widen. Expectations are slim that troubled Chinese developer will make $148 million worth of payments due on Monday, as it wrestles with more than $300 billion in liabilities. Financial markets were braced for more bad news about the shaky Chinese property market, as struggling giant Evergrande looks set to miss a fresh round of debt payments worth $148 million, and another developer pleaded for more time to repay what it owes. Expectations are slim that the company will make the semi-annual payments on its April 2022, April 2023 and April 2024 offshore bonds, which are due at midnight New York time on Monday, and so far those payments haven't yet been made. On top of this, you've also got Modern Land China asking for a 3-month extension on repayments on a $250 million bond due on the 25th of October. And supposedly Modern Land's chairman and president are providing the equivalent of $124 million in loans to help underwrite the firm's finances, because basically the company doesn't have any cash and needs to borrow more even from the president and chairman to actually meet any kinds of repayments. You've also got Fantasia Group Holdings missing the deadline on a $206 million international market debt payment as well. And on top of this, we've also got Sinic, another Chinese property developer, warning that it's likely to default next week. As I said in one of my videos the other week, Evergrande is not a one-off rare occurrence. Evergrande is going to be normal, and there's going to be many other Chinese property developers that fail to meet their bond repayments and also default on their debts as well. And this is why the Chinese government and the CCP won't be bailing out Evergrande, because if they bail out Evergrande, they basically have to bail out every single Chinese property developer out there right now. And that is something that China cannot do. A one-off, maybe they've got the cash for and maybe they can suffer it and take the loss, but they can't bail out every single property development firm. The reason why these property development companies are struggling so much in the first place is because they're so over-leveraged, and the Chinese government implemented new rules for them to reduce their leverage, which they haven't done. And therefore, if China starts bailing out every single developer left, right and centre, it was basically pointless them putting the rules in place in the first place. And the reason why the rules were put in place was to prevent an even more catastrophic failure than the one that's already being experienced. And therefore, this is why there is going to be contagion. It's not just going to be Evergrande, it's going to be every single development firm. That's going to impact the Chinese financial system, which is also going to impact the US and UK and Europe and everywhere else's financial systems as well. And on top of this, we've also got the inflation data coming out in only 2 days. Be sure to watch this heat map that he made. As you can see, so far in June, July and August, we've basically been tracking the inflation from 2008. And it's rumoured that September inflation is going to be even higher than August inflation, but supposedly is transitory. Now, I also wanted to touch on some cryptocurrency updates as well, because I do think that after the AMC squeeze, I'm going to be transitioning my channel into more of a crypto channel. 5 more countries will be accepting Bitcoin as legal tender by the end of next year, says the BitMEX CEO. The CEO offered 3 main factors driving the adoption of Bitcoin in developing countries and why he came up with this prediction. The first is remittances. Remittances make up 23% of El Salvador's GDP in 2020, citing data from the World Bank. He added that low and middle income countries receive about 75% of total global remittances, and $540 billion in remittances reached low and middle income countries in 2020. This money has got to find a way home somehow, he said, but the current system of remittances, led by money service providers like Western Union, is ripping people off by charging them an average of 10% just to send money home the next business day. So basically what a remittance is where one member of the family works in, say, the United States and remits money back to the rest of his family in El Salvador, for example. But at the moment, one of the only platforms that offers this is Western Union, and they charge an average of 10% of the money being transferred just to send that money the same day or the next day. The second factor is inflation. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, forecast inflation for developed countries in 2021 at 2.4% and a whopping 5.4% for developing countries. He explained that people seek alternatives to fiat countries during inflation crises. For example, he said, as inflation climbed well above 15% this year in Turkey, crypto adoption surged. Turkey responded by quickly banning the use of crypto for goods and services, but inflation is now at a whopping 19.25%. And Bitcoin fixes that because the supply is capped at 21 million Bitcoins. Therefore, you can't print more and more Bitcoins, causing more inflation. And the third factor is politics. He explained that many politicians or rulers are skilled and savvy and have an interest in positioning themselves as progressive, populist and new age thinkers. Over the next year, and as El Salvador works out the kinks of its rollout, savvy politicians will be thinking of how they can take a similar path as well, and how it or how their country might benefit both of them and their constituents. Effectively, what El Salvador did is take the first leap of faith, making similar moves by other countries much easier to consider. And obviously, as you have more and more countries adopting Bitcoin or adopting cryptocurrency as legal tender, it's only going to cause the price of Bitcoin and other cryptos to rise. And finally, getting rich with crypto the slow and safe way via compounding is better than getting rich quickly but with higher risk. You can earn huge amounts of returns on your investment by compounding your crypto by staking, lending, and taking advantage of compounding interest. Just like the 8.25% interest you can get using BlockFi, obviously linked in the description below. Crypto markets do not have set periods like bonds or savings accounts since they're always open, and it's also stated that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world and the secret to prosperity. On its own, compound interest is fantastic. However, utilising compound interest to collect additional units of an asset that is appreciating will drastically speed up the process. Guys, be sure to let me know down in the comments below what you think about there literally being no punishment for lying under oath, and also what you think about the secrets behind share lending. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of my others. Alternatively, subscribe to the channel and ding that notification bell, because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Cheers.